we can.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us from wherever you are in the world. What month is this? Oh, this is July. This is our July webcast. And so we're, again, super excited that you're able to take time out of your day and be with us. And so we're also very excited about today's topic and today's speakers as well. So as usual, we have some housekeeping things to get us started. And so during that time, we'll have folks join the call, and feel free to use the chat to tell us where you guys are calling from. So here's the agenda for the day. It's pretty straightforward. We'll kind of do some housekeeping, have some opening remarks, introduce our speakers, and like always, have an opportunity for an engaging conversation that hopefully you'll be able to take some learnings from and apply back in your club, in your country. And then, of course, we'll have a great sort of robust opportunity for questions and answers from the attendees. And so, and I want you to be thinking, as you're attending this session, to be thinking about those questions for our guest speakers today. So, on the housekeeping front, we will be recording this session as always, and this session, like all of our webcast sessions, will be available on the WFYC website. So feel free later in the week that you can access this this recording on demand and share it with your colleagues. And Dawn will be sending a link email to you after the session. We encourage everyone to keep their line on mute until the Q&A. Some folks are very comfortable with using the chat feature. Other folks are less comfortable. You have an option of verbally asking your questions if you so desire, or you can use the chat function, whatever you're comfortable with. And then we also suggest that you use the speaker view in Zoom, and you can find that in the upper right-hand corner or side-by-side speaker view to have the best kind of Zoom experience for today. So with that, those are our sort of very simple, straightforward housekeeping items for today. So my name is Mark Shamley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the World Federation of Youth Clubs. We are extremely excited about today's topic, and I'm going to introduce our speakers in just a second. So, but first, just as a reminder, our mission, the World Federation of Youth Clubs mission, is to develop, advance, and enhance global youth organizations that provide a positive environment and safe place for young people. That is the work we do, and our purpose is why we exist, okay? And so this is always an important point for us to reinforce. The goal of this organization is to support you and your work and build your capacity to better serve the young people that you're working with each and every day. That is why we exist. So from a value proposition standpoint, how do we do that? How do we create value for why you are part of this network as a member of WFYC? First and really importantly, we guide and consult. We provide the connection and technical expertise and knowledge through one-on-one engagement with each of you in whatever way it makes sense for your organization. That is Jose's time, Glenn's time, and now we just added a new mission advancement advisor, Tim Richardson, who just came on board earlier in July. And so it's through these sort of personalized connections with you to understand the things that are important to you and how ultimately we, as your sort of technical expertise, can help guide and assist you. The second area is around networking and learning. That is this opportunity for us to convene and connect, right, at our annual conference, and what we're doing today here at today's webcast. That you can learn not only from us, but learn from each other in what I call this community of practitioners, to sort of gain understanding and expertise from the practitioners who are on the ground doing the work each and every day. And then lastly, we want to promote and amplify your work. And so we can connect in ways through our collaborators and other networks to talk about the great things that are happening in your clubs and the work that you're doing with your young people. And the more we can promote and amplify that, the more visibility and the more opportunities for resources to come your way. So that's our three sort of legged stool for our value proposition. All of those things, though, one of the things we want to make sure we sort of hold dear to our heart, our secret sauce, if you will, is we want to remain a high-touch organization. We don't want to be this distant sort of group that you don't hear from, that we are, again, connected and we understand the needs of your organization and have solutions to help assist you and address those needs. So that's the value proposition of the World Federation of Youth Clubs. So resources, we continue to build those out. Okay, I talked about the one-on-one consultation. We've added new collaborators. We just added the Sloan Stephens Foundation and Sport Court in the last month or so. The annual conference, we're beginning to take shape for the annual conference that will happen in late February, early March of next year. And then, of course, you guys have heard about our global recognition program, the Promise Awards. That event will take place on September 14th, recognizing the incredible submissions that have been provided in the three categories of leadership, program, and youth. And so we're thrilled about this program and the ceremony or the celebration that's going to take place on September 14th. We just put out the monthly newsletter yesterday. I'm hoping you guys had a chance to read that and find it useful. And then, of course, we have our webcast, and there are more things that we're working on as we speak. So it gives you a flavor of the resources that we provide to the network. So let's take a quick pause for a chat check-in, all right? So if you could be anywhere in the world, now you got to do this in the chat, and Dawn's gotta read a few of these out. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be? All right? Wait a few seconds for you guys to respond.
Got to type it in there, Mark.
All right, anyone?
Gerard says here.
Wow, love it,
bonus
Gerard.
Points.
All right, this is mine.
So, on the beaches of Venezuela.
New Zealand for me. That's where I would. There you go. Right here, look at that. I love it.
And Rwanda.
Oh, India. I miss my mom. That's, yeah, I do. Yeah. Let's go, Eren said, let's do it. Let's go, Eren. We're going to New Zealand. We're going hiking. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you taking this moment to sort of participate in this part of our webcast experience. It is important. We want you to get comfortable using the chat and expressing yourself. So there is a little bit of a sort of a rationale for this part of the experience. So thank you. So without delay, I get to introduce our speakers. And so let's get right into that. Again, thank you for participating and joining what I hope to be an engaging conversation on the power of social entrepreneurship. In this session, you're going to hear from Eren Magada, who is the co-director of the Petra Zoo Initiative in Uganda, and Bala Molov, who is the assistant professor of public policy at University of Virginia's Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. You'll hear how social entrepreneurship initiatives can help drive innovation, create revenue, and economic impact in communities all around the world. And if you're considering ways in which to establish sort of sustained support for your organization and build new financial resources, and you're willing to embrace a little bit of risk, then social entrepreneurship might be right for you and your organization. So I want to just do a little bit more around the introductions to just give you some background of our two speakers, starting with Eren first. So Eren is the co-director of Petra's Zoe Initiative. It's a nonprofit organization located in central Uganda who uses a holistic approach to empower young people to be the best versions of themselves. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in human services from Stevenson University in Maryland in 2012. And after traveling the world for several years, she settled briefly in Austin, Texas, where she worked as a manager of a social enterprise called Savory, who used grilled cheese sandwiches to fight human trafficking. Eren now resides full-time in Uganda with her husband. And Bala Mulaf is the assistant professor of public policy at the University of Virginia. Bala is a globally oriented educator who has lived and worked in Asia, Europe, and North America. His focus areas are innovation and social entrepreneurship, and he is currently an assistant professor of public policy at the university. He's also the co-founder of Hava, a materials science venture that creates advanced fabrics that help people breathe clean air. In addition to these roles, he is a research fellow at the U.S. Army Research Laboratory. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bala, who will be our first presenter, and then Eren will follow. Bala?
Thank you, Mark, for the terrific introduction. Welcome, everyone. As a spiritually oriented person, I believe that every crisis also provides a great opportunity. And in that sense, with everything going around the world today, I can't think of a better time than to talk about social entrepreneurship, because it's definitely a mechanism for sort of rebounding even stronger, perhaps, after the COVID crisis that we're all facing. And at this point, keeping my academic hat on, I have a few slides just to set the framework for social entrepreneurship before I hand on to Eren. So I want to talk about the academic framework and some of the latest thinking in the field, more from the academic side, and to set the context for social entrepreneurship. Mark, if you go to the next slide. Thank you. So, this is a really trending topic in a sense that as a field of study, social entrepreneurship didn't really exist, perhaps even 10 years ago, right? And this headline here is actually less than 2 years ago, which was in the Forbes in New York Times, where the headline, which really stood out to me, was that shareholder value is no longer everything, top CEOs say. This is 2 years ago. And we all know, back from Milton Friedman's theories that up until recently, and perhaps even now, the sole purpose of a corporation is profit maximization for all the stakeholders, right? So for business leaders like the ones in the picture to come together and even acknowledge the fact that the primary purpose of a corporation indeed is not shareholder value, but we actually need to care about the environment and employee mental health, et cetera. It's kind of a very, very big deal. And it sort of blew me away that it's only 2 years ago that this statement was publicly made. So we sort of see why all the bad stuff happened before that, because if you're only focused on making more money, then perhaps that's not the most sustainable model. So I just wanted to start with this slide to set the context for this topic. So if I were to define what social entrepreneurship means, it's focusing on people, planet, and profit, right? So the 3 Ps coming together. And in a short sentence, social entrepreneurship refers to the creation of mission-driven, as opposed to market-driven, ventures, which are very often focused on neglected problems. But very importantly, they have an inherent business model from the beginning. So that business model is not coming later, but it's coming from the get-go, right? And there's a framework coming up where we'll explain this in some more detail. In other words, social entrepreneur ventures are measured both by the economic impact and their societal impact. So they need to make money, there needs to be a strong revenue stream, but they also are primarily focused on social change and societal impact. Thanks, Mark. So, what actually gave rise to social entrepreneurship? Or, why is this topic all of a sudden spoken about so much? Why are we spending so much time talking about it right now? right? So I believe there are really 4 factors that gave rise to this field of social entrepreneurship. And the inflection point in the middle, I would put the year 2008, because that's really a pivotal year for this field. The first point is wealth disparity. Now, it's not just across the world, but also in the US. We all see that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And overall, our lifestyles may be better than 100 years ago, but the number of poor people are also incredibly big. And the gap between the rich and the poor is also at all-time high, right? So this wealth disparity has definitely been a problem area, and one which social entrepreneurship hopes to address. The second reason is an increasingly sophisticated corporate social responsibility, or CSR movement. Up until recently, most companies, big companies have adopted a strategy called corporate social responsibility to show their more social side. So the company can continue to do what they do, in some cases not very good stuff, but perhaps put about 1 or 2% of the net profit back into the social side and sort of position themselves as a social business. And that thinking is now fairly sophisticated. So there is this idea, this ethos of shared value creation through CSR. The third main reason, I believe, is technology, right? We really take for granted that perhaps even 10 years ago, this would not have been possible, right? There was not enough broadband penetration across the world. And the iPhone, the ubiquitous iPhone, did not exist before 2008, right? So, and we sort of really take that for granted, because it's only in these last 12 years that we can have impact across the world through technology, without actually having to be there in person. So this whole concept of shared global moral responsibility, right? We can have impact across the world no matter where we are. So technology plays a huge role in this. And finally, the increasingly evident market, institutional, and state failures, right? And it all may be perpetuated around 2008. So 2 things happened, right? The big financial crisis of 2008, where perhaps people really for the first time realized that with Wall Street collapsing, that perhaps it's not a great idea to focus more on profit maximization, but have sort of a larger purpose for existence. And also one of the fathers of social entrepreneurship, Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh, who's a professor at Oxford in the UK, who founded the Grameen Bank. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. So that gave this field some real gravitas, some real acclaim. And then it was, he sort of proposed this field back in 2006, and really, it became evident that there was need for this in 2008 after the financial crisis. And ever since then, it's really taken off with more and more universities, for example, offering courses. At UVA, at the Batten School, we offer about 15 different classes just on social entrepreneurship and its variants. And you see that across the country, many, many universities are offering these courses. Mark? Thank you. So if I had to contextualize social entrepreneurship as a framework, this is really the framework I would use. It's actually back in 2004, Alter. So it's a very well-cited framework. The source is at the bottom. And it really tries to explain what social entrepreneurship is. And honestly, it's actually not a very easy topic to define, because it's sort of ambiguous in a way, and it's emerging. And but I'll try my best to this framework, right? So on the extreme right, we see traditional for-profits. Those are the C corps, the LLCs, which are primarily formed to make money. And over time, we see that for-profits have used a technique called CSR, and through that, they sort of are positioned as a socially responsible business. So think of the Microsofts and the IBMs and ExxonMobils of the world. On the other side are the traditional nonprofits, right? And now we all know that big problems with nonprofits are it's hard for them to scale and grow because there's really no revenue stream. It's hard for them to attract great talent, especially young students coming out of colleges, because they just can't pay the salaries. Even though these students want to work there, they just can't pay the salaries of an Accenture or Deloitte. So increasingly, nonprofits realize that if they really want to attract great talent, if they want to scale, if they want to grow, then they need to have some kind of income-generating scheme, some income-generating activity. And as nonprofits sort of create this income-generating activity, they become more like a for-profit in that sense. They're then called a social enterprise. So what I call the play area, or the magic zone here, is really that middle area, right? It's that gray area in the middle, which is social entrepreneurship. So the challenge then today is, if we know that most for-profits are trying to become more like a nonprofit in the sense that they want to show more social impact, And most nonprofits increasingly realize that they need a revenue stream, and they're becoming at least structured more like a for-profit. Then why can't we start at the middle from the get-go? Like why can't we start our companies from the middle area, which is now a B Corp? That's the government the mechanism to form a benefit corp or a B Corp from the beginning, right? And so the challenge is, how do you go about doing that? Now, some things to also consider is that since this field started getting more attention, what's really interesting to me is these topics started in academia, but over time, the market actually adapted to it in the sense that these concepts came out of academia, but then the market responded. For example, it was around 2013 or so that there was the first sort of legislation to create benefit corps. So the need started, the problem and the need was documented in academia, and the government actually responded by creating avenues for companies to start as B Corps. Also, the rise of impact investors, right? There was really no concept of what an impact investor was before that. But now there are a whole range of impact investors, in other words, sort of investors who want to invest in the social impact side of things, but they also want an ROI or a return on investment on that, right? So this is really the middle area, the gray area that is what social entrepreneurship is about. The next slide, Mark. So now, just to sort of put that in some color, on the extreme right, we see purely commercial, right? Those are the pure for-profits. On the extreme left, purely philanthropic, those are the pure nonprofits. So traditionally, the purely commercial entities, they appeal to self-interest. They're very market-driven, and they're all about economic value creation. Extreme left, they're purely philanthropic. They primarily appeal to goodwill. These are charities. They're very mission-driven, and they're primarily focused on social value creation. And social entrepreneurial models, social venture models are focused more on the hybrid in the middle, which are mixed motives, balanced of mission and market, and economic and social value creation. Some local examples in the US, we see Newman's Own Lemonade in Massachusetts, and also Ben & Jerry's, which, in small ways, they're even creating the whole movement for fair trade. They're creating sort of the social impact there, but they're also obviously very financially viable and lucrative in a sense. So with these slides, I just wanted to set the framework for social entrepreneurship. One with the framework I showed in the slide before, a definition, and also importantly, a question I asked myself is, what caused this field to actually rise? And I believe there were those 4 key factors that caused what it is today. And I believe it's really a mechanism for addressing some of the root systemic causes that that actually our society is facing, and address them at that systemic level. And that's why I'm sort of, honestly, really grateful to be working at the School of Public Policy, as opposed to, say, a more traditional business school, because at the end of the day, to be a successful social entrepreneur, I believe you have to engage with policy. You have to have a positive impact on policy or regulation in some tangible manner. It's not just about creating a product that will sell a lot, but you got to take that one step further, and in some ways actually, address the root systemic reason of the problem itself. And I believe social entrepreneurship is one of those mechanisms by which that can be achieved. I'll now pass on to Eren for the more practitioner part of it.
Thank you very much, Bala, for laying that framework. It was very enlightening, even for me, who is involved in this in the field. So thank you very much for sharing. Like Mark said in the beginning, my name is Eren. I am a co-director of an organization called Petra Zoe Initiative, and we work right now only in Uganda, but are hoping to increase our reach throughout Africa, and then perhaps on other continents as well. We don't know. I'm really excited to be here today to share Petra Zoe's story of how we introduce social entrepreneurship model into our organization. And why I'm excited is because we almost did it on accident. And as I take you through the story, you kind of will understand more about what that means. But I think our story will be encouraging to a lot of you guys that are on this call who maybe have no idea what social entrepreneurship is, have no idea how to implement it. And I think hopefully by listening to our story, you'll feel a bit encouraged and you'll feel a bit empowered, and you'll be able to take some things that I share and that Bala has shared into your organization. You can go to the next slide, Mark. So Petra Zoe's vision as an organization is to raise a generation of self-driven, responsible, and economically empowered youth. And so that's our goal, that's our vision, that's what we do as an organization. And we have very many programs that do that, but starting back in the beginning, how we were born was we were very aware of the high rate of uneducated and unemployed youth in Uganda. And youth in Uganda, teenagers primarily, make up the largest part of the population. And so we knew we had to address the issue of unemployment among the youth and the issue of uneducated youth in Uganda, but we didn't know how to do it. And so we started off doing like day trainings. So bringing a group of youth, training them for a day, maybe on how to make soaps, how to grow mushrooms, how to rear rabbits. But what we found is because the youth were only coming for a day, they would go back to their community and they wouldn't implement anything. They didn't have enough knowledge. They didn't have enough experience. So we decided to create a more permanent learning structure. And how we did that is we rented a room. It was a very small room in a very small market, and we invested in a little bit of shoemaking equipment. And the reason I want to emphasize small is because sometimes I think when we hear the word social entrepreneurship, or we think of starting a social enterprise or whatever, we think that it has to be some big thing that we do. But what I want to emphasize today is that the importance of starting small. And we started small. We had one classroom in one marketplace in Uganda, and youth started to come. They were interested in learning how to make shoes. So people around kind of got to know us, and they said, well, have you ever considered teaching hairdressing? And so we're like, that's a good point. Like maybe we'll introduce another class. So we rented another room in the small market and invested in some hairdressing equipment. And then other people came by and said, you know, my children are there and they're very interested in learning tailoring. And so again, we were open to the idea. We rented another room and we opened a tailoring workshop. And the youth started to come, and the youth were really, really into what they were doing. And then another person came by and said, I see you're running 3 different classrooms. Why don't you start a vocational institute? Now, when Petra Zoe first started, we had no intention of starting a vocational institute. But we looked and we were like, you know what? We have the 3 classrooms. We meet all of the national standards to have a registered vocational institute. Why not? Let's have a vocational institute. And so that was back in 2018 I think around November is when we got registered, and it was a really exciting moment for us. But then we had to move on from, okay, we have these students learning these skills, but what's next? Because what we were seeing is a lot of vocational schools in Uganda were teaching how to do things, but not what to do after the youth have learned these skills. So maybe they were able to make a really good shoe, but how do you market that shoe? How do you sell that shoe once it's made? You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we decided to introduce supplement courses along with the skills. So we were teaching tailoring, hairdressing, shoemaking. We were teaching cosmetics manufacturing, cosmetology, welding, plumbing, carpentry. But we recognize as an organization, if we don't teach these youth how to run businesses or even how to read and write, then all of our work will be in vain. And so we started to introduce work ethics. We started to introduce business classes, adult literacy courses, computer classes. We partner with an organization called Work for Life, which I'm sure is in many countries that our affiliates are in. And they're an amazing organization that teaches you how to start, manage, and grow a business. And after that, we started to see the energy pick up in these young people. So not only could they make a good product, but they were also equipped on how to sell their product. And that's kind of how we grew. And then we were like, okay, we're growing as an organization, seriously, but how do we sustain this? Because I think Abala mentioned nonprofits have a huge challenge in growing and scaling up because we heavily rely on donors for our sustainability. And we were growing so fast that we recognized we couldn't rely on our donors. We couldn't rely on only outside income to sustain our programs. You can go to the next slide. So what we decided was, instead of only focusing on teaching these youth the skills, we were like, okay, how can we incorporate this into our model and also have it benefit our organization? And so what we did is we took the youth through their courses, and when they would reach a level of mastery of their skills, we would, in addition to helping them start their own businesses and having outside customers besides us, we would basically contract them to make products for our organization. So what happens is we contract them to make a certain number of products, and that can be shoes, or the bags you are seeing on your screen are part of our website, part of things that we sell both in the United States and Uganda. We contracted them to sell or to make school uniforms, school shoes, because that was a more relevant market in Uganda, because we don't want to only teach them how to make things that people from the US or Europe would like. We want them to be able to make things that they would be able to sell in their own country as well. So we helped find those gigs, we helped find the market, and then we would help build up their own personal businesses by pay them to make products for us. So it would benefit the youth because we would be paying them to make their products. And then it would benefit Petra Zoe because we would sell those products to get income for our organization. And we are a nonprofit. And so we don't run this as a separate business from our organization. All of the money we get from the sales of these products goes directly back into our organization. And so this is really cool because the youth are getting an opportunity to learn how to make a variety of different things. They also get bragging rights of their products are getting exported to other countries. So it kind of attracts other people to get business from them. And then it also benefits Petra Zoe as an organization. This kind of slowed down a bit during COVID, but it has just picked back up again. In Uganda, our main markets are schools because each year schools contract people to make thousands of uniforms, thousands of school shoes, thousands of backpacks. And then outside of Uganda, a lot of, especially in the US and Europe, a lot of people are attracted to the local African fabric that you see in these pictures. And so they're excited. And I think Bala also mentioned there's this wave of interest for purchasing things that give back to society. People are more mindful about where they buy from. And so this is a very good time to be able to bring things out of this country and bring things into a different country and be able to tell the story of your organization, be able to use this as a platform to not only get money for your organization, but an opportunity to get your name out there, to get your story out there. And yeah, like it's been really, really cool to see how these products have like entered us into circles that we would not have been able to get into had we not started this model. So that's kind of Petra Zoe's journey to how we entered into a social entrepreneurship world. I think we're moving on to questions and answers after this. So I'm going to stop there just in case people want to ask more questions from myself or Bala about what we talked about.
Great. Eren and Bala, thank you for sharing your experience on social entrepreneurship. And so we're going to open things up to questions. Again, you could utilize the chat. I'll check with Dawn to see if there's any, but in the meantime, as your questions roll in, I have a couple of questions for each of you, Eren and Bala. So I'm going to start with you, Eren, because I love this story, like the evolution, your guidance around starting small, and then discovery of opportunities that resulted in sort of where you are currently today. And I'm sure you guys are thinking, okay, where can we take this? Like, where can we go with this initiative, especially as you think about your expansion into other parts of Uganda and expansion to other parts of the world? Tell me a little bit about like the internal workings and in particular the mindset. Like this requires some risk taking, right? And I talk a little bit about that because some people are not as comfortable with the idea of entering into a commercial enterprise to ultimately drive revenue, and it does require an entrepreneurial mindset. Can you talk a little bit, Eren, about what that looks like in your organization? How you sort of cultivate that, nourish that sort of entrepreneurial mindset in your organization to pursue these kinds of opportunities?
Sure. Yeah, it is risky, and for a lot of people, I'm sure they're much more comfortable writing letters to donors and inviting people to give. But I think it helps for us who are in Uganda because the mindset of entrepreneurship is so prominent in the country of Uganda.
Right.
And for someone to start a business, it's not as daunting as somebody in, say, the United States starting their own business.
Right.
For some reason in Uganda, people are more willing to take that risk.
Okay.
And yeah, a lot of times it results in failure, but they say, okay, that didn't work, let me start over. And we've seen that with some of our products. We've seen that with some of our classes. They have really not worked. And so I think just being okay with the fact that you're not going to get it right from the beginning, you're going to fail, but you get up the next day and you start over. And it will work out. And so I think sometimes people think, well, if it doesn't work the first time, then that's it, it's over. I think once you overcome the fear of failing, then you can do anything.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. So I'm going to, Bala, can I follow up on this point about something you made, point you made around about policy, right? And engaging with policymakers, right? Because what I heard from Eren was one of the reasons why they advanced in this area where they were addressing the issue of youth unemployment, right? And untrained and uneducated youth in Uganda, and that was a major problem. And so as you think about this story from Eren and the work that she's doing, I'm thinking, boy, there is a policy opportunity here. There's a opportunity to engage with policymakers there in the country to talk about the ways in which this program is addressing that issue of youth unemployment and training and economic opportunities. Can you sort of help us bridge and think about like how to make the connection as relates to this particular around engaging with policymakers on this topic?
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. That's a really great question. And it's actually one of the big challenges of this as well, because as an entrepreneur, someone like Eren can do her best to create change, but and also has control over the company, but then she really has zero control over in this case, the Ugandan government and how they would operate. So, it's super challenging in that sense. But I believe it's more about the values and the fact that Eren actually wants to do that, right? And she's not, looking to not do that, and also wants to closely engage with these youth and hear from them what the solutions are, rather than going in with a solution that she thinks is great. So one thing that really differentiates social entrepreneurs is that they very closely engage with the people they're trying to help, as opposed to say, the stereotypical tech entrepreneur in the Bay Area who thinks he or she is building some really awesome code and just thinks that the entire world will adopt that, right? So it's almost like the value system to begin with. But yeah, I mean, that's really challenging. But I feel like there needs to be more and more people who are getting engaged with politics, who actually want to, if you want to create, and we see that not enough people are perhaps engaging on the political side. There seems to be a lot of change happening in the private sector. But if you see historically, at least in the United States, most big social change happened through the government, right? The electrification of rural America, women's voting rights. If you see major social changes in the US, they were not to the private sector. But now, increasingly, and there are reasons for this, it's becoming more through the private sector. And I guess the magic bullet then may be the whole concept of public-private partnerships. Right. Another key area of social entrepreneurship, and also this concept called pay for success, social impact bonds, which we didn't really touch on, but there are mechanisms for sort of bridging that gap and incentivizing both the public sector and the private sector to work together. So that would be a start. But yeah, I I believe it could be really engaging. It could be really challenging to do that in countries which you're not very familiar with.
Absolutely. I was thinking as you were talking about the private sector, and full disclosure to all the folks on the call, I spent a lot of time in my career in the CSR space. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to put it out there. But there are also some, I would say, some blemishes in that area. I don't know, Bala, if you would agree that there is lots of interest and talk about social responsibility on the parts of companies, but then they sometimes fall short of that. That's sort of what we call whitewashing the CSR space or green space, where there's, for branding and promotional purposes, some companies engage in this activity, but then not necessarily sort of take it to that sort of next up of really engaging with the people closest to the issues that they're trying to solve, and then providing an opportunity to hear from those folks and let them be part of the solutions to impact their communities. So that being said, I do see that there are opportunities, right, with social entrepreneurship initiatives for, to your point, public and private partnerships to come in and say to Eren, hey, we have the ability, the distribution, the technology, the know-how to scale your program up, to take it from where it is today to ultimately where it could be. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how those kinds of things could work in the context of scaling programs and the roles that corporations or private sector might be able to play in relations to working with groups like Petra?
It's a question for me, Mark?
Yeah, for you.
Yeah. So, I guess, so this concept called pay for success, right? That's something
Right.
to be really looked at. It's outcome-based sort of financing, a social impact bond. So that's where there's the government involved, there's the entrepreneur like Eren, and who's sort of the service provider, and the private investor. Mm-hmm. So, the investor upfronts the capital to the entrepreneur or the service person. And if the goals are met, then the government would reimburse the investor with interest, right? So the investor still takes the risk, but at the end of the day, if the outcomes are met, so there are ways to sort of incentivize the government, the investor, and social entrepreneurs or service providers to sort of engage together. But that's, again, a relatively newer concept, coming, and at least more mature in the United States. I'm not sure how, the examples of that happening in Uganda and other African countries, but there are small steps to sort of bridge that gap, because it's a very big gap to bridge, because the thinking and the incentives are so different in the two.
Yeah, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity to have those kinds of conversations, to broach those topics around scalability and working with the private sector. Obviously, there's a proven model that works there in Uganda, and Eren and your team, and you have demonstrated that, but then you're thinking about what the next steps are. So I'm going to turn to Dawn. I think there's some questions that have come in through the chat. So Dawn, do we want to take a few of those?
Yes, there's lots of questions coming in, especially from the affiliates are very curious to have some questions for Eren in particular about just her project. One of the questions is asking, what were the challenges in keeping youth committed? So when you're trying to get people trained, were they kind of committed from themselves, or did they need a lot of encouragement?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think that's a lot of times also why people are afraid to start something like this, is because, Mark, you were asking about mindset when it comes to the leadership of an organization, but there also has to be a huge mind shift to the people that you are serving and involving. When we first started, it would have been very easy to quit, because youth would come in, they would commit for maybe a week, and then we would never see them again. Or people would come for a day and then they would leave. But then we had a core group of people who stuck to it. And when they stuck to it, they were given opportunities to start a business. They were given opportunities to get paid to do what they had learned how to do. And it doesn't take long for word to travel in very small communities. So you had in the very last slide that I showed, that gentleman's name is Brian, and he has stuck with us for a long time in perfecting his tailoring. And he used to be somebody in the community that nobody would have expected anything to come out of. But then he was determined to perfect his tailoring. He was determined to be the best he could be in that. And now he is one of the ones making most of our products because he does such a great job. And so that has encouraged a lot of the people who have dropped off to come back now that they have seen that success. So I think something that we need to remember is that just because people don't buy in the beginning doesn't mean they're never going to buy in. If you continue and just keep those core people and really invest in those core people who have shown to commit, word will get around and people will see that it's working and people will come back.
Great.
If I may ask a question to Eren, if that's okay?
Sure.
So a quick question, Eren, is that, so obviously, what you're doing has a huge economic development aspect to it. You're really revitalizing the economy, providing jobs, etc. So how engaged is the government then in helping you scale this up?
Question. They are not. So we are very, very connected with the local government. We have a good relationship with our mayor. We have a good relationship with our community development officer. We have a good relationship with the local police. So we have involved largely every sector of the local government that is around us in our district. But what the problem we are running into right now is when we try to engage on a national level, there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to how funds are given out. A lot of times when funds come in, it is already decided who is getting what. So a private sector organization who is largely unknown on a national level is not going to get first dibs on that money. Then there's, of course, with a lot of governments around the world, there's a lot of mishandling with funds and things like that. So unfortunately, we have not been able to engage on a national level, but we are doing well on a local level. And we're hoping that because of our heavy involvement on the local level, eventually we'll have relationships on the national level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question here. How do you avoid the misunderstanding of profiting from the work, right? How do you kind of a labor exploitation of participants since the income goes to the organization? So how do you kind of address that to make sure people are clear about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I said in the presentation, we contract our youth to make these products. So these youth have graduated from our program and have already started their own businesses. And so essentially, Petra Zoe is just one of their many customers that they are getting. And so even though we are reselling their products, which each of our youth are very aware of, we have an agreement about how much Petra Zoe is paying for each of the products that they will be making for us. And so because we have that contract and because we have that agreement, we avoid that issue of exploitation. It's not like we have a whole workshop of youth and we're just going to give you something to do and then go sell your products on the side. They are aware of the agreement and most of them are excited to be able to give back to the organization in that way while also getting profit themselves. I hope that has answered that question. Yep. So largely it's just over communication to both the youth and our supporters who purchase from us.
Yeah, I love that, Eren, right? Over communication, right? So that people really understand that they are contracted for sure. Another question was about whether or not kind of just were the youth staying involved, right? So were there, once they were trained, were there those that just left to do their own thing? Or were there ones that, do most of them kind of stay involved?
Right now, I would say it's about 50-50. A lot of them go on to do their own thing and we support them in that. And a lot of them stick around and want to still be really heavily involved in Petra Zoe. And we're not biased towards one or the other. Mm-hmm. If one of our youth goes on to move somewhere and gets a great job, even outside of the skill we have taught them, then that's great. But then if they are really interested in sticking with the organization, that's also great. And I'll give you an example. A couple of our students who have gone through our programs, both within the Vocational Institute and outside are now employed by Petra Zoe because they have stuck with us. But then there's been others that we have trained and they're living on a completely other side of the country doing their own thing. And both of those are okay. And I think something that's important to remember is the same track is not good for everyone. So it wouldn't be good for each of our youth to stay close to us and never branch out to see what they could do. And so we try to give guidance as we can and provide support as we can. But at the end of the day, they're going to grow up and they're going to make their own decisions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, just a comment there is, zooming out a little bit, if you zoom out a little, if you're really successful at what you do in a social business, you should put yourself out of business, correct? Because, if you're addressing the root cause, then there should be no need for, it's a very idealist situation, but I guess that's the ethos of it, is that, now the youth have the skills and they can go out on their own and they don't necessarily need the marketing or the branding or the entrepreneurial help that's provided. So, yeah, I think, but that's also a challenge because then it's a fine line between deciding when to let them loose and when not to.
So Bala and Eren, we're approaching our time where we need to kind of wrap things up, but I want to, Dawn, do we have any more questions from the attendees?
We have one more just to see if there might be a quick answer here.
Okay, great.
Wondering about do you feel like this work is supporting the transformation of young people in relation to like family models who have suffered so many problems? Like, how is this helping those family models, or is it not?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said, we are kind of developing this as we go. So something new we have developed as Petra Zoe is it's called a family intervention program, because we have seen a lot of the issues that our youth are going through are largely generational. And so, like, I don't know who asked that question, but the person who asked the question has a very good point. Yeah, maybe the youth learn how to do these things and are very successful, but how does that help the family at large? And how does that help their siblings? And how does that help the generations to follow? And so something we're doing with each youth that comes into our program, we're now addressing, okay, but where has this youth come from? What are the issues in the family? Why has this youth not been educated? Why is this youth unemployed? And we go to their families and find out, is there alcoholism going on in the family? Is there generational poverty going on in the family? Is there generational, maybe teenage pregnancy going on in the family? And then as an organization, we're creating a network of other organizations to connect with, to address issues of the entire family at large, instead of just focusing on one youth at a time. I hope that answers their question.
That does. Thank you, Eren. Bala, closing question, what advice would you give, and I want to pose that question to you, Eren, as well. Quickly, what advice would you give to an organization that is considering a social entrepreneurship initiative program or social enterprise kind of initiative or program?
Yeah, I guess my first and most important advice would be like to really do some soul searching and to know why you're doing what you're doing, to really have the value system in place. Because if not, sooner or later, you're going to get into trouble, because it has to be a choice and has to be very organically and the values really have to be in place from day one. So even before the strategy or any of that, I think the soul searching aspect of that, I think, is really important.
Great. Thank you. Eren?
Yeah, I think, like I have mentioned before, start small, and don't be afraid of starting small, and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. And also something that I think a lot of organizations are afraid of doing for whatever reason is partnering with other organizations. You can't tackle an entire country's problems alone. And there's a good chance that there's other people in your country of origin that are already doing something like this. So you don't have to do things by yourself. You can reach out, you can get wisdom, and you can find partnerships that could really boost what you're trying to do.
Great. Both very great guidance and advice. I want to thank you both, Eren and Bala, for your time and attention and your expertise. We really enjoyed, I know I enjoyed this conversation. It literally, we could go on for another hour talking about this topic. So thank you so much, and thank you, and continue with the great work that you're doing around this topic. We want to hear from you as the attendees, so we always are looking to make these webcast experiences better. So please give us your feedback, and Dawn will be sending out a follow-up email to all the attendees to gather that feedback, and feel free, and please tell us what you think. It's important. The next webcast, we were thinking youth employment this month. We shifted that to August, and so another topic is sort of ties into what Eren was talking about in her remarks around the growing issue around youth unemployment, which is a major concern around the world. Just a quick reminder on the Promise Awards, that celebration is going to take place in mid-September. So look for that. And thank you all that have participated in the Promise Awards submission process. So if you have any questions, you want to just say hi to us, whatever it is you want to do, you can always email us at admin@wfyc.org. And I think, Dawn, that is it. We are, oh, look at it. We are right on time. Look, talk about efficiency, folks. So Eren, Bala, thank you. Thank you for all the attendees. Again, this session will be on the World Federation of Youth Clubs website. You can download it. You can access it at any point in time. You can send it to your colleagues. Please, please, please feel free to share it. And thank you all. Wherever you are in the world, have a great day, great evening, great morning, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.